Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Deep Drive podcast. My name is Jake, joined by my friend Dante Cardi over here, and excited to take another lap on what we heard this weekend. Now, Dante, the last couple weeks, we had some different hosts of this podcast, Kelly and Trudy, so they have really outclassed us. There's no way we will be able to compete with them, so we'll try. We'll try to keep it as classy as they did. This whole podcast is designed to help you dig a little bit deeper into what you heard on the weekend, and we always want you to take with you what you're learning, not leave it in the room or leave it on campus or leave it in your living room if you're watching online, but you got to really chew on it and make sure that God is continuing to teach you some things. And so this week we started this new series called Dark to Light. And it's all designed to help prepare us to celebrate Easter really well. And I love the tagline. It's the most important week of the most important person who ever lived. And that is, it's a powerful way of thinking about that last week that Jesus lived. And each day that we're going to look at his last week, it's going to teach us something about who he is, what he came to do. And ultimately, I think it's going to point out a lot of different ways that we've misunderstood why Jesus showed up and who he is in our life. And so, one of the things that our friend Mike talked about this weekend was what Jesus set out for this thing called Passion Week, which we've named it after the fact. They didn't call it then, but that Jesus set his face toward Jerusalem. Like he intentionally set his direction to do this unbelievably difficult thing for the sake of everybody else. And so just, Dante, as you think about your life, what's an example of something that you maybe like, we're not going to compare ourselves to Jesus setting his face toward Jerusalem for Passion Week, but in all of us have had some kind of moment where we like determined we're going to do something, we stuck through it even though it was hard. What is your version of that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think there's a lot of little moments in my life where it's like finally, and I'm a bit of a procrastinator, so it takes me a little bit to get going. But in one particular area, and this is the example I love to use, is in terms of my occupation. So prior to ministry, I was in sports, had a very fun career, watching college athletic events, who wouldn't love that? And I just felt like ministry was a thing, and it's been a call since I was little, but I didn't want to do it. It was one of those things where I sort of was like, I'll just volunteer at a church, and I think that will suffice. But I really felt like it was something I can do. And I can remember the moment I was like, all right, this is what I feel like God's doing. This is what I feel like he's calling me to. So I'm going to go. I'm going to set my face. I'm going to turn towards it. I'm going to do it. And it's the one thing now that in my life, like I just don't worry about. This is what God wants me to do. This is what I'm going to do. And people go, what's your 5-year plan? It's like, I don't know. It's whatever God says, do that next. And I remember my prayer simply being, God, whatever door you open, that's the door I'm going to walk through. And so for me, that has been one of those things. And like, I could say like, I remember I was going to the gym a few years ago, just determined, but that ultimately wanes off and then comes back, wanes off. But I feel like when I've set my face with God and together we've said, this is the thing we're going to do, it's just lasted a little bit longer. So occupation for me has been one where I've sort of locked in.
There you go. In Luke 9:51, Jesus, it says that he set his face toward Jerusalem. And when it's described like that, it ultimately indicates this intention that he had. Like he did it on purpose. This wasn't something that happened to him that he was surprised by. And we're going to see that in multiple days throughout this last week of his, that Jesus was doing this on purpose. And I think that when he even said it himself, my life isn't taken from me. I'm giving my life. I'm laying it down for the sake of other people. So when you think about that, of like Jesus intentionally did this on purpose. Like he knew what he was headed toward. He knew what it was going to cost him. God's even going to give him a preview of what he's going to experience in the Garden of Gethsemane. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. How does that change the way you see his sacrifice for you? Like, how does it change the way that you understand that gift of grace?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've sort of gone through this week, and you read a little bit more on the life of Jesus, you realize that it wasn't like he turned his face and he was at peace with everything, or he decided he was going to do this and he didn't feel the weight of what he was going to do. But he has real feelings. You mentioned the Garden of Gethsemane, which is like this real moment of him saying, Lord, if there be any other way, take this cup from me. He was distressed, to his soul. And so it was this real moment of him experiencing humanity and the weight of what he was going to do. And I think, as a kid, there's like this superhero Jesus. He conquered death and took the sting and all this, but he actually felt every moment of this. And I can imagine Sunday as he's coming in, like he's beginning to realize this is the final week. This is the final countdown. I'm feeling these things. And to me, that is like, you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to go through this for us. But the fact that you did, the fact that you felt all of that makes it so much more special. And I can remember as a youngster learning about, Jesus died for you. And I think from there, we kind of go to everything else in Scripture. We jump to, well, tell me a little bit more. And you learn about Genesis, and we don't really come back to this week. It's like the first thing that I learned, and I never went back. But when you go back, and I love that we're studying sort of every day in this series, there's so much in here that sort of just shapes theology, shapes his last day, shapes our opinions. And when you really start to pick up on it, it's like, I don't know why you did it for me. But it's that weight of what he did, like it begins to weigh on you a little bit when you realize the sacrifice that he made and didn't have to.
Yeah, we've been singing this song, God, I'm just grateful for you.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite songs because you can kind of just yell it and you don't have to sing it, and I cannot sing. So I sound better when we sing those kind of songs. And there's a couple lines in there of, I couldn't have earned it, but you did it anyway. Yeah. I didn't deserve it, but you did it anyway. And I think that if we don't sit with the weight of this week, it's going to feel like Jesus picked up the tab at the end of dinner, or he helped us move when, he was the one with the pickup truck, that's not the level of sacrifice we're talking about here. And in order for us to understand the goodness of the good news, we first got to sit with the weight of the bad news and sit with that sin. And I think that is, especially for maybe people that have grown up in the church, you just hear it over and over and over again. You got this annual holiday that we celebrate. It's like, yeah, got it, cross, Jesus died, rose again. And it can, every once in a while, it's just good to sit with like, no. He knew what he was doing, and he sat with it, and he had to feel it the whole time. And it was heavier than anything we could ever imagine. And not in a way that like it depresses us, but it just hopefully, back to that song, increases our gratitude for what he's done in our place. And so as Jesus is doing this, he's coming into Jerusalem. It's the beginning of that week, and he does this fascinating arrival. He could have shown up any number of ways. He could have shown up like a professional wrestler, like, that's Jesus's music. He's coming down to the ring. Yeah. He could have shown up like a political, some kind of politician at a rally with some kind of song. And instead he got on a donkey, and he came in through the east gate, not the west gate. Everybody else would have come in with some kind of show of force and power. Yeah. He comes in on a donkey in a sign of humility. And so when you think about the way that they would have done it if they were in charge, the politicians would have shown up with a force, with a show. Jesus shows up in humility on the back of a donkey, walking over people's coats, people saying Hosanna. What, I guess, how do you think about the relationship between Christians and power? Yeah. And like politics, but even just like control and feeling in charge. How do you process how we ought to think about power?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I love, descriptors that we use of the kingdom is like this upside down kingdom. It's this different than what you would have thought it would have been. And at that time, they're all looking to Jesus, and they think he's the one that's going to take over Rome. He's going to be. And so that force of might they would have been expecting. And then you get this totally different thing. And I love in the moment, it didn't stop them from celebrating. They're like, oh, he's here. All right, I guess a donkey is the thing. Let's go. But I think so many times, like we we model our lives and we want to look like Jesus, but some of these attributes that he have, like we sort of put to the side and are influenced more by society. And so humility is one of those big things that I think, in our society today, it's always like the loudest Christians are the ones that get all the views and the looks. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if what they're saying is really lining up with what the kingdom ought to look like, with what Jesus has called us to as Christians. And so I think there is this delicate balance, and I'm all for politics and voting and Christians being active and all that stuff. But if that is the thing, if that is the thing that we're modeling after and our lives are looking more like that and less like Jesus, then I think we're probably out of balance a little bit in terms of this idea of we need power versus the way that Jesus did things. And I always tell people, well, I love what we do. And we get a chance to be pastors and on stage and lead people. That is not the only way to make a contribution to the kingdom. The reality is we need more Christian school teachers. We need more Christian doctors. We need more Christian politicians, lawyers, police, whatever it is. We need more of that. And if that is the thing that we can begin to say, like, I look more like Jesus and I'm a teacher, then we can really begin to make a difference in our society, And I say, like, at that point, if everybody was doing that, it wouldn't matter how we voted. It wouldn't matter the power struggles that we experienced, because we would all be living the way that Jesus intended us to live. I think there's some statistics out there, like if every church adopted a kid, like there would be no more kids in adoption. There's something, whatever it is, all the people in the church. But like if we were really doing what Jesus calls us to do, like we could solve a lot of these problems that I think are actually in the world. And so that struggle sometimes I think is power versus humility versus what everybody else is doing versus what we're called to do. Is just this sort of a mess that we're in a little bit of.
Yeah, if you do a quick lap throughout history and look at how did power change people, it's not great. Like it's not a great track record. Like in the Old Testament, one of the best examples would be this guy named King Saul, right? Saul starts out hot, coming in for God, leading well, a man of integrity. He looks the part. He's big. He's strong. Everybody loves King Saul. And then over time, he gets power. And with power comes a lot of paranoia, a lot of competition, a lot of people coming for his throne. And so what does he do? He gets paranoid. He starts seeking other sources of wisdom instead of God, and eventually God removes his blessing from him. And then we're like, okay, well, let's get rid of Saul. Let's put in David. David's a man after God's own heart. He's the one that threw the rock and that big guy fell, and like everything's going to be great. Well, even David, once he gets into power, there's corruption in his own heart. He's not in the right places at the right times. He has an affair, commits murder to cover it up. His own kids come after his throne. And so like, I'm trying to find the story where power made things better or made things simpler. Right. And, even in our own country, what I would say is that we have this illusion that once we, and I put we in quotes, like whoever we is for you, once we are in charge, like things will get better. And so we lobby and we campaign and we post and then we get in the comments section, we say mean things, and then our person actually gets elected and we get in charge. And then what happens? Like they let us down because they're imperfect. And there's not been a single politician that has ever perfectly served the people that elected them. And that's an impossible goal. It's an illusion that's going to be the thing that settles it down. And so our hope is not in the ruler of the day or the politician of the moment, but because they're just as imperfect and just as insecure and just as unstable as I am. And I don't want to say they. I know who I am. Right. And if I was in that position, I would be unreliable too. And so what that doesn't mean, though, is that we just completely check out. Like I love what you're saying of we need Christians in that world. We need to have some kind of civic engagement so we can advocate for policies and programs that we believe will lead to human flourishing. Yeah. But if the reason that we want to be in charge is to be in charge, or if the reason we want to be in charge is to have the power, then we've missed the point. And so if we can use these opportunities to be the primary way in which we serve our neighbors and love our neighbors and invest in the thriving of the community, great. If it's all about us being in charge and not those guys. I think that the thing that makes me nervous that I know is not new. I've read enough history to know that this isn't new. Where people have been people, from what I understand, forever. But the evolution of politics into what I've observed is almost like a team sport.
Yeah.
And I say this is like, I love sports. So I've got Kentucky basketball is my one team that I will never miss a game. Those those young boys in their early 20s affect my mood often. It's totally irresponsible. And as a passionate fan, I will defend my team all day long, even when I know it's totally irrational. Even when I know that if that player was on the other team, I would totally hate them. If they were wearing orange or black instead of blue, then I would be so mad right now. But they're my guy, and so I'm going to defend them. And it becomes when it becomes really unhealthy is when it becomes so part of my identity that I can't even critique it. That's when you know it's been too central to you. Yeah. If you can't step out of it and say, even though I voted for that person, even though that was my policy, even though that is my line of thinking, I still think I wish they could do better. I wish they could behave themselves. I wish they could care about other people better. But if power is the ultimate goal, then it really changes the way we see things. I wrote this down, and I'm really hesitant to use this illustration because I'm not a fantasy like book or movie guy. So if you love Lord of the Rings, please forgive me for what I'm about to do to this illustration. But I remember watching those movies once because they're 9 hours long. And I remember, there was the ring, right? Yeah. And then when did you watch these movies?
I've fallen asleep through all of them. So I don't know that I've ever watched it completely.
All right. Well, at least you've seen the poster. There's a ring, right? And this ring is ultimately what Frodo's supposed to take to this place. I'm so sorry to those of you that are passionate about this, but ultimately when he touches it, it changes him. He was supposed to be just the courier that got it to the place, but because it was power, it changes the way he saw himself and the whole world, and that's the level of corruption that it can bring. And so if we can take a beat, say when Jesus showed up, they all wanted the political power. They all wanted the military power. Instead, he brought the power of the kingdom of God. So it wasn't a powerlessness that he had. Right. It's just a different kind of power. Yeah. And if we can aim at that to the thriving of other people, then that's great.
Yeah. And I think, Jake, the thing that I've noticed with it, I say it like we've gotten to a place in our society where we can't even disagree anymore. It's like if you disagree with me, we're now mortal enemies. Right. And we've seen it trickle down into families where, moms aren't talking to sons anymore, aunts aren't talking. And I'm like, this is not the way. And so that power thing, once you start chasing it, like it will never be satisfied. And so it's one of those things where you have to be really careful because we're having division here. Like I'm not sure that's the way that we should be going. And so it's one of those things I think you really have to, and as much as I don't know about Lord of the Rings either, so we probably should not have used that example at all.
You may just want to cut this whole thing before we get angry emails.
But it is true. Like you had it, and I set out for a noble mission and I was going to do the thing. And the more I held on to it, the more corrupted I got. And it's definitely what's happening, I think, in our society.
Bro was talking about, again, that misaligned expectation of Jesus. The crowd is singing Hosanna. They're saying, save us, but save us by getting on the throne. Save us by picking up a sword. Save us by doing all these things. And I was recently looking, scrolling Instagram, and I saw this post from our actual founding pastor at Real Life named Kyle Idleman. Yeah. And Kyle's a great friend. He loves Real Life, obviously. And he's leading a church in Louisville, Kentucky. Great writer as well. So if you're looking for a book to read, he's got one coming out called The Missing Messiah. And I'd put it in Amazon, grab the book. But one thing he posted is that there was this group of college students that was recently asked the question, what features or attributes would you want in your ideal spiritual leader? So, it's probably a good question for all of us to think through. And here were just a couple of their answers. One of them said, a guide who helps me figure out my life. Someone that says, I'd want him to meet my needs, but not make demands. I want spiritual guidance without all the religious rules. One of them was just apparently very frank. Someone who supports my political views. Another one said a leader who focuses on love and acceptance and not judgment. And then a few other responses. And then he went on to write. He said they didn't want a spiritual leader who points them to a kingdom and a higher standard. They weren't looking for a faith that demands allegiance, surrender, obedience, or sacrifice. These students didn't want a king; they wanted a consultant. They weren't seeking a lord; they desired a life coach. But then he also was very fair to them, saying that's not their fault, because that's actually how Jesus has been presented to so many of us, is that he's going to be the life improvement product for us, not a king to follow or a lord to submit to. So how have you either seen that? And then let's be honest, as guys that every once in a while get to represent Jesus on a stage, even the temptation to sometimes present Jesus that way, because it's so much more attractive to so many people. So how have you seen it been presented that way? And then how do you fight as a representative of the gospel, not accidentally representing Jesus that way?
Yeah, we've got this. There's all kinds of Jesuses out there when it comes to people's perception, right? So we got the 911 Jesus. When my life is upside down, this is the guy I call. We got the because I follow him, nothing ever bad's going to happen to me. We got this is the guy that when I give, he gives me more, and so I'm never going to. Like, there's so many different versions of him out there, and I think the benefit that we have is that we get to be in rooms with people that are experiencing life. And it's hard to look a parent in the eyes when their kid is not doing good and try to make up a feel-good moment, right? They're living in the reality of this. Or when I do my hospital visits and he's saying, man, I'm ready. This is too much. I just want to die. And it's like, well, I could sit there and I can make up a good feel-good, but that's not the reality of the situation. So sometimes for us, it's a little bit easier because I think the reality is that some people have been following Jesus all their life and they still get cancer. And some people have been following Jesus all their life and they never get the financial breakthrough, right? It's just that's not the reality of the life they've experienced. And if I get up there and I present something that is not true, then they begin to doubt their faith. And so it's like this unique thing that we have to play. But when I look at the life of Jesus, he doesn't pull punches. Now, he does it in a loving way. He does it out of honesty. He does it out of the humility that he is. But he says, here's the truth. Here's what this means. Here's what you're going to do. And he challenges particularly the religious of the day. He goes toe-to-toe with them and says, you guys are missing it. Here's the actual point. Here's what this actually means. And so I think that's really, as pastors, as leaders, as people that get that chance to stand up there in front of people, like, we are held to that standard of, I can't get up there and just give you a motivational speech. Because sooner or later in life, you're going to come up against something. And if all you have is motivation, like, it's not going to be enough to carry you or sustain you through. So we've got to be honest. You know, he says, in this life, you will have trouble. Like, I cannot bypass it. I can't take that scripture out. But at the same time, he says, I've come that you may have life and life to the full. So sometimes the ways in which we define this stuff, we will say, okay, a full life means you're going to have a full bank account and you got to have all these things. And it's like, it may be true for some. But it may not be true for you, and I think our job is to help shepherd people through some of those misconceptions and things that they hold.
It's not universally an age thing. I find it fascinating that this is college students that are saying this.
Yeah.
Often when I meet people that have that life improvement product version of Jesus, it just in the back of my mind, I think, oh, you just haven't been through anything yet. Like, you just haven't hit that rock bottom. You haven't hit that moment of desperation to where I don't need you to, I'm not looking for you to consult me. I'm not looking for you to make this 10% better. I need you to save me. I need you to rescue me. Like, that's a totally different way of approaching Jesus. And then for the rest of my life, again, this theme of gratitude. Once I've been there, then I can trust him. Then I can submit to him. Then I can genuinely see him as a king and as the Lord of my life that I'm grateful to submit to, instead of feeling like it's some obligation or some kind of, he's going to diminish the quality of my life. Because ultimately, all those answers were, I've already got this figured out. I just need you to make my currently constructed plan easier, simpler, more lucrative, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And instead, when we come to Jesus, we're actually saying, I'm giving up my plan. I'm not in charge anymore. I'm not calling the shots. And that is an act of vulnerability. Like you're risking something there. Like what if his plan is different than what I wanted? But what I can honestly say with every ounce of conviction that I've got is that his plan is so much better.
Yeah.
It is, it's undoubtedly different than what you would have come up with, but it will be sweeter. It'll be more meaningful. It'll be more impactful if we can trust him enough to let go of our plan and let him take over. And that's ultimately what it means for him to be the king and the Lord of your life.
Yeah.
You know, in Luke 19:41, it's just for those of you that are maybe new to this, there's 4 gospels in the New Testament, and they're all biographies of Jesus. They tell us what he did and what he said and how he treated people and what his life meant. And sometimes they describe the same event, and they'll describe the same event, but sometimes in like slightly different ways. Some of them will use different details, or some of them will highlight different parts. And probably the best illustration I've heard of that is those gospels are like 4 people that, now this is like negative, but like you know, if you were standing on 4 different corners of an intersection and you saw an accident, well, all 4 of you would describe the same thing. You just maybe bring up different things, like I saw this color of the car, or saw this glass fly this way, or whatever. So the gospels are describing the same events just from different angles, they're highlighting different things that mattered either to them or to their audience. So while we're in the Gospel of Matthew for this series, Luke also describes it. And in Luke 19:41, it says that when Jesus got to Jerusalem, he started crying. Like there were tears. He was weeping. And I'm always reminded of Jesus when he saw the crowds and he's worn out. Like I don't think he's got it anymore. He just doesn't have the energy anymore, you know. And it said that he saw them as sheep without a shepherd. He had compassion on them. Yeah. So when you think about Jesus walking into this thing, he easily could have said, "You ungrateful group of people. Like, you have no idea what I'm going to do for you. I can't believe that I'm having to do all this. I can't believe I'm having..." Instead, he shows up and he sees those very same people that he knows are going to turn their back on him in a matter of hours.
Right.
And he cries for them. Yeah. How does that change the way you see Jesus and the way, honestly, the way we ought to love the people that we find difficult to love?
Yeah. I have a men's group. We meet on Tuesday nights, and we love reading through Scripture. And one of the things that I always say is, man, I don't understand how the disciples could see everything that he did and still like doubt and still not get it. And there are times in my own life where he's done things for me, and I can remember like being like, "God, I am so sorry I doubt you. I'll never doubt you again." And then 3 weeks later, something else pops up, and I'm like, I don't know how he's going to do this. And that moment that we talk about Scripture, where he gets to that place, and he knows the next hours, the next week, what's going to happen, and yet he has compassion, always puts me at a little ease. Not that I want to continue to doubt, but is that in my humanity and my insecurities, he knows. And he still has compassion. Not that I have to have it all right all the time, but he knows that I'm going to say, "God, I'll never doubt you," in one breath. And then a week later, something's going to pop up, and I'm going to be like, "God, I'm not sure." And that to me has always given me like a little bit of a breath to be like, man, I'm not perfect. I'm trying to figure it out. And we're going to get there together. But God always gives us grace, and he always gives us compassion. It's one of those things that I love about the Scripture, because it's sometimes we have this view that we have to live up to a certain level. And I think God does call us to levels, and he wants us to go on this path with him. But if I don't get it all right on day 1, I'm probably going to be okay. If I don't get it all right on day 2, but am I growing in some things? Am I seeing some spiritual growth? Am I understanding things that I didn't understand yesterday in a little bit better way? And so just that he would stop. And once again, I love the emotion that Jesus shows. And sometimes we don't talk enough about that. And it's not in a negative or a soft way, but this is how he felt. And he's like, man, they need a shepherd. And they don't even know. They're crying out, "Save me," but they don't even get what I'm getting ready to save them from. Yeah. It's really cool.
Going back to that combative nature of our culture right now, of us against them, my team, your team, there are groups of people that are difficult to love. And if anybody deserved to be annoyed with a group of people. It was Jesus walking into this crowd.
Yeah.
And I was get on social media. I don't know whether they called it Twitter or X. I still call it Twitter. Maybe I'm old. I don't
All
know.
the old folks.
It doesn't really matter. There's this author and leader named Rich Viotis, and he's in New York City. And he had this line. He said, "It really is a curious evangelism strategy to despise the people you were trying to bring to Jesus." And I thought that's so strong. Of like, if I have this group of people that I despise, it's going to be really hard for them, for me to exhibit the love of Jesus to them, the compassion of Jesus, the kindness of Jesus. And then I found this so fascinating. I went to the comment section, the replies, which is just, I'm pretty one of my hot takes is that Satan invented the comment section because it's so clearly him just saying, go for it, guys. Fire each other up. But what happened in the comment section under that tweet was a bunch of people saying, yeah, they are always like that. They aren't kind. They aren't generous. They aren't and it was almost like they were proving his point because they were using this, the tyranny of this group of people that I actually don't even have relationships with. I've grown the monster in my head of what they're like and who they really are, but they're the problem.
Right.
And I would hope all of us would see Jesus's tear-filled compassion for a group of people that he knew was going to turn on him in a matter of days. And he didn't have disdain for them. He didn't talk down to them. Right. He didn't lecture them. Instead, he went and willfully laid down his life for them. And so I would just ask all of our crew, instead of saying, yeah, they are like that. They are the worst. They are the ones that are, I'd ask you and myself, I'm doing the same work. Who's the person? What's the people group? What's the political party? What's the whoever that you have a really hard time enjoying? You have a really hard time believing the best about? And let me just ask you this question because it was convicting for me. When was the last time you prayed for them? Yeah. Prayed for their good, prayed for their salvation, prayed for them to know Jesus in a life-changing way. Because if we are not actively praying for them, it really reveals in our heart that we've lost our care for them in a significant way. And so that's what Jesus, as he enters that city, it really it points out to me I've got a long way to go and having compassion for people that are difficult to love.
Now, I once had a pastor say, you can't evangelize and antagonize at the same time. And that's where it feels like sometimes in our society, like, I want to change you. I want to do this, but I'm downplaying or I'm degrading who you are as an individual. And we had Dr. Preston Sprinkle who does some great research work, and he had done some studies within the LGBTQ plus community, and he had spent some time with some trans folks, and he was just asking them their take on Christians and Christianity. And the response that he got had broke my heart, because he said that they said they've never experienced a Christian show them love. And it just was like, that should be the very nature, whether we agree or all that other stuff, that should be the very nature of what Christianity is. You should be able to experience love. And it was just, we get so caught up in all the circles, that they versus me thing. And we will push every circle away, and realizing that the farther I push you away, the farther it is for me to actually grab you and help you see the truths of things. And so I think that is a brilliant point of this idea of we got to love people the right way, in the way that Jesus does.
And just to overstate our case here, or to provide ultimate clarity for our audience, the evangelize is the priority, not the antagonize. The winning and the debating. And I've seen a whole lot of baptism videos here at Real Life. I'm waiting for the one that says, you know what? Someone was so mean to me on Facebook that it changed my life. I totally see who Jesus is now.
That's what pushed me.
Yeah, that's the thing. This guy was so mean. Instead, it was someone that showed compassion and love and hospitality. And so that is not that is not us dismissing truth and speaking truth and when it needs to be spoken, but such that if we have yet to shed tears for that person like Jesus did when he showed up to Jerusalem, if we've yet to pray for them before we engage in conversation, then we just aren't ready. And it means that we're prioritizing winning over seeing them know Jesus. And that's a dangerous place to be. You know, this crowd, so they're saying, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. And then just a week later, they're saying, crucify him, crucify him. And there's a fickleness and a emptiness to the applause of men. And you and I, we have this funny job where we, every once in a while, stand on a stage and talk to a bunch of people. And then sometimes people want to tell us things about how we did, and most of the time it's really, really nice. Every once in a while, people have a thought, but for the most part, they're kind of just encouraging you in doing that. And what I have found is that does some funny things to your head and to your heart, of either the way you see yourself or the kind of things that you'll say next time because they clapped for it last time. Right. They really liked this one last time, so I'm just going to give them more of that because that seems to be what they like. Yeah. How have you, in your role, in your own journey, wrestled with that applause of men and women and the applause of a church and not allowing that to change the conviction of what God's asking you to say?
Yeah, I've got this theory, Jake, and it says that when you get to heaven, I don't think there's going to be a pop quiz. Who was your pastor? What church did you go to? And if you answer Dante, it's going to get you in the door. It may actually be a detriment.
I don't know. It gets you in like a club, maybe. Yeah.
And so what I have, that responsibility then says I need to be able to share the truth and do it in a way so that you then can grasp it and develop a relationship with Christ. This is your walk. This is something that is going to be beneficial for you. So I can only get you so far. At some point, it has to become your thing and your responsibility. And if I am just chasing the applause or the thing that I think makes people feel good or the thing that's going to make actually me feel good because they applaud, right? So it's more on myself, then I'm probably can lead people astray. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about, this power thing, right? So even if the applause is the thing that I'm chasing for, I will begin to say more things to get the applause
100%
than I will to actually help you see the truth. And if at the end of the day, all you walked out of here with and you applauded, but your life never changed and you never did anything, like I'm then doing you a disservice. Yeah. And so I've got to be very wise in the words that I'm using and what it is that we're called to do. And we're called to teach the complete scripture. We're called to help shape your life. And some of those things are challenging. As we walk through this week, you're going to see some challenging moments and some things that Jesus did to challenge people idea and theology. And it's just part of what we're asked to do. But if I'm chasing the wrong things, I can get so caught up in myself and what they want to hear, and I want to make them feel good, we can miss the whole point of it.
I remember early as I was starting to teach, especially in the adult. So I started out in student world, and then I got to the adult world, and I was young, and I was just trying. Honestly, I just really wanted to be liked. I wanted everybody to enjoy listening to me. And I noticed in my heart that as I was writing my message, I was really excited to tell the funny story about my dog and spilling the drink in the living room and whatever else. And then I would literally lose energy in the message when I was teaching the scripture. And then I got really excited to tell that joke. And because I knew humor for me was my applause moment. That was what they really liked because I could hear it. They were literally laughing, or they would come up afterwards and say, "That was so funny. I love when you tell those jokes." And so what it did for me is I just said, "Oh, that's what they like. So let me do more and more of that. I'll just be the funny one." And it was a real conviction moment for me of like, why am I more excited to be liked than to help people know Jesus more? And it really was that stark. And so even in my own writing discipline now, I do all the scriptural research first. I do all the theological outlining. I do all the work. And then the very last thing I add is some kind of illustration, some kind of joke, something to lighten the mood a little bit every once in a while before we go back down. But it has had to be a discipline for me because I knew I was aiming at the applause of people because it gets real complicated on that stage of, are you excited to learn about God? Are you excited to know his word? Or are you telling me whether I'm valuable? And so it is a funny thing that it does to your head and heart. And we have to be really careful to ensure that we are prioritizing, because there's going to be a moment It's why I like sometimes teaching through a chunk of scripture and saying we're going to commit to teaching through this whole thing either chapter by chapter or verse by verse, because then sometimes it forces our hand to talk about something that had we been choosing the topics, we probably wouldn't have talked about this. Right. But it sets us up to talk about some difficult things. And then it's the real test of, do I want to draw people to who Jesus is, or do I just want to be liked? And that applause is fickle. We, our family planted a church in Santa Barbara, and one of our experiences is that as a team, we would get in front of this whiteboard and we would write down names of people that were growing and that they were serving, and we were celebrating them. These were our wins, is what we call them. Like, this person is now reading the Bible for the first time, or this person's serving for the first time. And then what I learned in a very short amount of time, because COVID kicked in and it just, that just changed everybody. Yeah. All of a sudden, the people that used to be our wins, that used to be our biggest fans, and they told us how great this church was and how much better we were than all that stupid other church down the road. And like 1 year later, they were saying, you're not doing enough for me, and you're not actually pastoring me, and you don't really care about me. And within such a short period of time, the people that are your biggest fans can eventually become your biggest critics and leave. And that's where it requires something that's way more stable than the opinions of people in the moment. It's going to require us aiming at an unmovable target, which truly is the grace of Jesus, as we lead people toward it. So let's wrap up with this one. Bro said that a better understanding of that prayer, Hosanna, is not save me by giving me what I want. Save me by getting on the throne. Save me by picking up a sword. He said, it's save me from me. I thought that was, I hate when he's that convicting. That's really annoying. But why is it often harder for us to say, hey, actually, God, I need you to save me from me, not my circumstances, not those scary other people, not the boogeyman on the other side of the aisle, but the dark parts of my heart and these disordered desires that are driving my decisions. When you think about that prayer, God, save me from me, we'll get real, both of us. When you think about that in your own life, what is the thing that God needs to save you from?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. And I've thought about, like, when we start walking with Jesus, a lot of us say, like, Jesus, I'll follow you, but let me tell you where I want you to go. Mm-hmm. And so I know in my life, it's like, okay, the spirituality thing, like, okay, you can have that, but don't touch my relationships, or don't touch this area, or let me do what I want to do here. I mean, most of it is a control thing for me. Of me wanting to be in control, thinking that I know what's better, thinking that I know the next 5 steps to take. And there's so many times where I have to say, your way is better. I think I believe that. And then I have to say, like, your way is better. I know I believe that. It just doesn't feel better. But I have to be willing to release the control of all that in my life. And it's one of the most difficult things. And I've been in church all my life, been a Christian. I say there's probably some moments of not really active in my faith, but for the most part, my entire life. But there's still some of these things to where I still want to hold on and have control of it. And that's where it's like, it's not getting me any further along. It's not doing anything better for me. And the challenging part of that, Jake, for me is in those areas where I have released it, my life is infinitely better. I've got more joy. I've got more peace. And so it's like, why are you still holding on? Why are you still doing this if you know when you let go? And it's just that control thing for me. So that to me is one of those areas of, save me from me.
Yeah. I know mine, and it's pride, and I have this like competitive nature. I have this achieving nature to where if left unguarded, it grows into this supreme self-confidence that I actually know what I'm doing and I'm pretty good at this. And actually everybody else would be better if they would just do it like me. And if they would just listen, I could save them a whole lot of heartbreak. Like, just let me control your life. Let me tell you what to do. Let me give you all the answers. And through some significant moments of disappointment and even like probably the word failure in my life, I actually think he's given me the gift of failure every once in a while, because otherwise I'd be just more and more convinced that I was the one figuring this out, and that some of the really good things, even at real life, I would take credit for if I wasn't careful. Like, man, I think I must be a pretty good leader. I must be a pretty good teacher. I must be a pretty good pastor. And that's why things are fun. And God has kicked my butt in a very holy way to remind me that he's the one doing all this. And any moment that I'm ever tempted to sit in a seat of spiritual judgment over someone else's failures or frustrations, it's another reminder of I've just forgotten how far away I have been and how much further I have to go. So I need, before I start lobbing comments in the Twitter section about they, or before I start trying to grab power because I think I've got it figured out, saying, God, will you save me from me? Will you save me from the desires that are inside of me that are very real, and they're going to wreck my relationships. They're going to wreck my attitude. They could wreck this church if I'm not careful. And to sit in that seat of humility and not a seat of pride is going to set me up for success. Doesn't guarantee it, but it sets me up to where God has at least a voice in my life to shape me and mold me. And so, as you're listening today, as Dante and I have asked that question, I hope you'll ask that question too, of what does God need to save you from yourself? Save me from me is a great thing for all of us to be wrestling with this week. Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Drive podcast. Excited for this series as we continue to walk with the most important person through the most important week ever lived. And we get ready to celebrate Easter and the resurrection of Jesus together. It's going to be a blast. Dante, thanks for hanging out.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next week.